Okay, welcome back to part two. We were talking about the differences between deflation and disinflation. And one way of thinking about inflation is think of it like a moving car. Um, and I'm using the word moving because we're looking at two things, the direction the car is moving and the speed. And so when the car is moving forward, prices are going up. And that means we have inflation. When the car is moving in reverse, we're having deflation. So I just mentioned the direction the car is moving, right? Um, let's talk about when the car is moving at a constant rate of speed, let's say 50 miles an hour. Then this is like saying that the inflation rate is at 2% each and every year. In other words, there is no change in the inflation rate, or to go back to the car example, there is no change in the speed. You're still moving forward, or in this case, there is still inflation. It's just that the inflation rate isn't changing. Now, what if the car slows down from 50 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour? It's still moving forward, but at a slower rate. This is the situation when, in the headline that I read to you in the last part, inflation from March to April slowed from 2.5% to from 3.3% to 2.5%. So when the inflation rate slows, we call this disinflation. Now, finally, in the car example, if the car stops and you put the car in reverse, this is like falling prices and this is deflation. So Um, when we talk about inflation, when it is low and stable, it has very little effect on the economy. But when inflation tends to get high and volatile, it can have three big effects. One, it's called a price effect, income effect, wealth effect. I tend to focus on the income effect and the wealth effect. Um, let's go to price effects. So take a look at this. Here we see the changes in prices in terms of inflation rate for individual types of goods. And you can see gasoline from um, in 2003 rose 16.5%, while some other goods fell in price. The average inflation rate was 2.3%. So if you happen to be buying a good or service that tends to be going up higher than the average, your personal inflation rate will be different than the average inflation rate. And when we talk about income effects, your money that you have in your pocket, we tend to measure it in nominal terms, meaning when you a $100 bill in 2013 is the same in nominal terms as a $100 bill in 1903. There is no difference in the nominal amount. The difference lies in the purchasing power of that $100 bill. And that's what we call real income. Real income is the amount that you're paid and the purchasing power from that income. So when prices start to go up, somebody's income must be rising, right? And what we see here is a nice little picture here where wages since 1990 have been rising faster than prices. Now, I just got through telling you that when prices are going up, somebody must be paid more because wages are based upon, in part, prices of the good or service that was produced. What would cause wages to go up faster than prices? Well, I'm sorry. It basically comes down to productivity. When wages are rising faster than prices, that means worker productivity must be increasing. Now, what about wealth effects? Well, like I said before, anything with a price has its own price. That's self tautology there. Anything with a price has an inflation rate. And when assets go up in value, that means the assets are experiencing price inflation. So take a look at this. From 1991 to 2001, stocks rose in value, or the prices of stocks rose 250%, as opposed to stamps, they fell in value from that same time period. Now, the average price level, or the inflation rate, was 32%. So some assets rose faster than others. Inflation basically acts like a tax, taking income, or in this case, wealth, from one group and giving it to another. So it's like a transfer. This redistributive mechanics of inflation includes price effects, income effects, and wealth effects. So um, basically, your attitudes depends upon what side of the exchange you find yourself. In other words, if you're a buyer, inflation is not really good to you because you are being taxed, so to speak. Money is taken from you and given to somebody else. If you're the seller of a good or service that's rising in price, well, that means you are getting more than you had in the past. So you like it. Now, like I told you before, inflation itself is neither good or bad. It's bad when it's volatile, when it's unpredictable, when it's too high. And the reason why is because when it is rising faster and faster, it starts speculation, meaning an asset bubble or a price bubble. People start buying it not because they start buying a good, not because of uh, the intended use of that good or service. They buy it simply to flip it, to sell it to somebody else for more, and that could cause distortions in the economy. People can overinvest. People can focus too much on a sector of the economy that's simply experiencing inflation, and that could cause destabilization of the economy. The housing market is a very good example of speculation. People overinvested in housing. Why? Because it was rising in value so much. Then suddenly people realized maybe that they overinvested, and then the bubble burst, and that caused a great deal of ill effects to the economy. Then there's the issue of uncertainty. If prices are rising in an unpredictable fashion, that means you cannot predict your costs. You cannot predict your revenues. And when that happens, people only think short term. And when people think short term, they don't take on long run projects. And these long run projects, be it research and development, be it upgrading your factory, have a big positive impact on the long run productivity in an economy. So what happens is when countries experience unpredictable inflation, they start to experience ill effects in terms of a falling productivity rate. So we talked about speculation, and here's a good example of 2000, in the 2000s. You see this rapid increase in the average price, annual price of a home, and this was just fantastic it, home price inflation. And then of sort of suddenly people figured that maybe they overinvested in housing, and you see that the average prices started to fall. And then right here in about 2008, um, home prices started to fall in value. In other words, there was deflation. And these gray areas, by the way, are periods of recession in the economy. This means that GDP is contracting. And you could see that home sales started to fall when prices started to fall. We talked about uncertainty in terms of how that is debilitating to economy in the long run. So what about inflation recently? Well, you can see inflation from 1996 to about 2006 averaged about 2.5% annual change, which is within that range I told you about 1 and 4%. And look at the volatility. There was a high of about 4% and a low about 1%. So this fell within that range uh, where Americans find tolerable. 1970s, not so much. So look at the 1970s. You could see here the average inflation rate during the 1970s was 7.7%. I've overlaid the average inflation rate of the 1990s and 2000s, 2.5%. And look at the high. The high is about 14%, and the low is about 3%. So that's very volatile. And here's a nice little trick. If you want to make people believe that inflation is more stable than it really is, simply increase the scale of your vertical axis and you can make something look more stable. When you eliminate this needless white stuff, you can see the true volatility of the indicator that you're measuring. So the next part of our inflation talk, we'll talk about the causes of inflation. That's going to be part 3.